My name is
Action.
Punk Rowe, and I'm very happy to have Tom Varner with me today. I'm going to um, prioritize your introduction. I'm going to go with composer first, French hornist, and music educator. How's that?
That's fine.
Uh,
And band leader too, you could say, or
and
ensemble leader.
yeah,
Yeah.
I like to start out with a semi vague question, and I'm wondering, in listening to your music and what you've done with the French horn and your approach to your original work, if you consider yourself from an early age to be a pusher of boundaries,
I would probably say yes. Maybe not 9 or 10 years old, but 17 or 18 years old. From then on, yes. Yes. I've got to say, yeah. I would have to say yes.
did it run in the family?
No, not well, I had two big sisters that loved music and loved had these wonderful record collections of from Judy Collins to the Beatles to Eric Dolphy, or the Pentangle. I used to joke about the Pentangle. Very 60s. So I had two big sisters, 5 years older and 3 years, 2 years older, and that set some sparks, I think. But they did not become professional musicians. But one is a very fine poet in the Western Mass. He's in the Greenfield, Massachusetts area. But from so not music boundary pushers from my family, but I kind of just fell in love with I played French horn since I was in the fourth grade. So by the time I was a high school junior, I was like, I really like jazz more actually now that I think about it. But well, I can't really change instruments now. I'm too old. So um so I just stuck with it. And then when I found out from a next door neighbor about Julius Watkins, that helped me realize, well, then Julius Watkins, who actually went to high school, I think, with Sheila Jordan, or to the same high school, Cass Technic. Um, but from age, say, 18 on, I was getting that bug for thinking, well, maybe I could be a jazz improviser on this crazy instrument. There now I found out that there were um, I didn't know about Jeff Stockham, although he's a little bit younger than me, but not much. I then found out about John Clark, and then I found out about David Amram. Hopefully, you could do 1,000 interviews with with him. Um, Willie Ruff. I found out a little bit about John Gross, Graas. You probably know him, and and then it and then for a while there, that was it. There were a few other. There were studio musicians who could really play in the jazz mode, and or classical musicians who could play with a great jazz feeling, like Gunther Schuller or like um, Jimmy Buffington. But people who were real improvisers, there weren't that many at the time when I was, say, 17 or 18. But it was slowly growing, and it dawned on me that, and I was just a very stubborn kid. I was like, this is what I want to do.
Did
And so
you
I
get,
just kept at it.
did you get the early on the idea of, I'll call it the typical jazz performance, where the head is at the beginning and at the end, and in the middle there's this, as long as it goes,
Hmm.
but still with structure.
Hmm.
Did
Hmm.
that did, did that dawn on you by yourself, or did you have help from a teacher?
Good question. Well, I was just listening and listening and listening so much that, but what was unique perhaps for me or my age, those kids that were like in high school in the mid 70s, I was high school class of 75. We were listening, we weren't doing that thing of like, you can't um, walk until you learn to crawl. A lot of us were listening to Ornette Coleman and Clifford Brown and Charlie Parker and very quickly and Anthony Braxton. and Roscoe Mitchell, and um, so music that was would be considered more quote straight ahead jazz, and music that was quote considered avant-garde jazz, and music that was perhaps more structurally postmodern, and music that was, like you said, theme, solo, 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 trade, trade fours with the drums, theme, and out. So by the time I was maybe 19, I was already doing a mix of those different approaches, I
Did
would
did
say.
Chick Corea and the his electric band or Weather
Mm.
Report have a space in there somewhere?
Yeah, I love that music when I was, and that also kind of turned me on to like, um, wow, I want to do something not necessarily electric, like what was that? The Return to Forever. I did go see them twice, and that was really amazing in the, again, early mid 70s. Um, and that was also like structurally, it wasn't just boom, boom, solo, solo, over. Chick had much more of a wider um, compositional outlook, one could say. What's interesting is more recently, I've been going back and listening to the music from a few years before that, like Now He Sings and Now He Sobs, which was that incredible trio with Miroslav and Roy Haynes. And that is some very free music. Some of it not. Some of it they play standards. And then the very next track is like totally free. And then the next track they play um, My One and Only Love on that record. So that was a nice influence on me in that during that time period, now we're talking late 70s perhaps. I wanted to do all of the approaches at once, or not at once, but I wanted to feel um, proficient in all of those approaches, I would say.
Meanwhile,
Yeah.
to get into university of your choice, did you have the classical horn repertoire under your belt as well?
Yeah, a little. When I was in high school, I was taking some classical French horn lessons with the local guy in one couple towns over, um, and who was quite young himself. So he was really encouraging and nice and wonderful. And um, so I did. I just looked at my. I was opening boxes and trying to throw away. You know about this from moving, throwing away stuff, throwing away stuff, throw it away, throw it away. And I opened up a box, and there was a program from, I think it was May 1975. So that's 50 years plus a couple months. And it was when I played the movement from the Mozart Horn Concerto with my high school orchestra. And that was a sweet memory. But that was the pinnacle of my classical career. I played in local, like the South Orange Symphony, and this is we're talking suburban New Jersey. So I was in Millburn, New Jersey, South Orange Symphony, some others in that general area, um, and I loved it. Those were wonderful, wonderful experiences, and I loved classical music from say age 18, 14 to 18 a lot. But then I kind of got the bug, um, and I also when I first again Hamilton is a similar place. I first went to, or at least for me, um, undergrad, first 2 years, I was at Oberlin College. Now, Oberlin has fantastic music, but I was in the college, not their conservatory. They're much better now. They're much more, I think, freewheeling in terms of what a history major can study music more. So I realized there was this unspoken rule of like, well, you're a good classical player, but you're not really good. Silly, so silly for an 18-year-old. But I also was kind of by then I'm realizing there's hundreds and thousands of really good like the kids that might go to Juilliard or Curtis or whatever for classical French horn. There's not there's like maybe on one hand, students out there in the world that really want to be on a high level jazz improvisers on the horn. And I say, well, this is what I want to do anyway. So I might as well just put all my energy into that. So that was kind of my, from age 18 on, I was just like, boom, that's what I was going to do.
Our younger daughter played French horn for quite a few
Ah,
years, and I can recall listening to her, when she was starting, and you described the French horn as slippery.
yes,
And
can be at first, especially.
we'd listen to her trying to find a pitch to go up to a pitch and miss, and then finally get it. And my question to you is, do you think you were blessed, born with a good ears?
I did have good ears, but I did not have a naturally great technique. I was slipping and sliding like everybody else. I did take piano lessons, thank God, with a wonderful lady in Summit, New Jersey, Miss Capitola Dickerson. And she was a jazz lover and she was a fantastic just person and teacher. And she told me stories about going to see Billy Taylor on 52nd Street. And she'd play me her Art Tatum 78s. So, and I was a terrible pianist, period. But I loved her and she just instilled this love of music. And so that helped my ears for sure, the piano. And I had pretty good ears. I could pick out melodies and things on the piano and on the French horn. But the basic classical technique was still not easy. I had to really work at that. And then when you fast forward from age 14, 15 to 18, to translate the technique of the French horn onto being able to play in that language of Miles Davis or Clifford Brown or Charlie Parker on a French horn, that was required a lot of work, but it was just like kind of slogging work, which after a while you kind of get it. You just have to like get through the difficulties of the articulation of how how am I going to get this note to go from here to there the way it sounds like a tenor sax imitating Dexter Gordon or something. How the hell am I going to do that? Sometimes you just play, and you get it.
Is that, I won't even say easier, more possible to pull off by articulating each note more
Yes,
than
this is
slurring?
a very good point. In the beginning, I sounded very stiff and corny because the only way I could get the notes to come out just right was to tongue every note. So it would be like da, 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 da. I would sound like a 20s band. Da, 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 even if I'm trying to play bebop. And I remember how there was this breakthrough somewhere in end of freshman or sophomore year, I don't know, around 19-ish, 18-ish, 19-ish. I realized, wait a minute, if I can get that phrasing better and not have to tongue every note, I will have made um, a big leap of getting closer to the way we would want it to sound. And I forget whether it was summer of 70, maybe summer of 76, summer of 77, 18, 19. I was able to then finally be able to articulate phrases in a more of a bebop language way that a trumpet might do or a tenor sax might do, and not have to tongue every note. And that was a big deal, I remember. Then it kind of felt like I was off and running. So I was at Oberlin for 2 years, but I was not in their conservatory. And there were some many good things. I had made many good friends, some I'm friends with to this day. And bless him, you might have known Wendell Logan, Logan. He was one of the main teachers at Oberlin then. And but he was like the one voice in the wilderness kind of. And they were very conservative back then. Um, so I realized I need a place that's going to be more supportive. So I switched over to New England Conservatory. So I had 2 years at Oberlin, 2 years at New England Conservatory, and they were very different. They were like, "You want to play jazz on the French horn?" And at first they were like, "What?" And I said, "Yes." And they're like, "Okay, come on in." Gunther will love this. My first year there, it was Gunther's first year not there because I think he just wanted to do his own thing. He was tired of being a president. Um, but I was always in touch with him, and then I was in touch with um, maybe you've interviewed or for other projects, George Schuller, his son, who is a great drummer and is also a kind of a keeper of the flame of the information of the Linux Jazz School and things that Gunther was up to, and Birth of the Cool and a lot of those things. So I found a wonderful community then for those next 2 years
And you
at
worked
NEC.
with Rand Blake as well.
A little bit with Rand Blake. I first went as a third string major, but I realized I got along Rand a lot better if I was not in his program. Rand, you have to do it his way. Again, bless him, but I wanted to kind of do it my way. So um, their quote African American music or jazz program was at that point for 1 year only. Ernie Wilkins, who was great. Ernie was there. Jackie Byard, of course, was there. There was a composer, a pianist named Tom McKinley who was there. And then the next year, Jimmy Jufrey was there. George Russell was there. And then Rand Blake was there. And they were all wonderful and supportive, I must say. They were all pretty, they're like, you're a crazy kid that wants to play the French horn and be an improviser? Okay, go for it. They're
Nice.
much more like that.
Yeah.
So,
I'm going to skip ahead
yeah,
a little bit.
yeah.
In order to make a living, when you establish yourself in New York City, and um, during the best years for you, what would a week of work
Mm,
entail?
mm. Good, good question. For some years, many years, even if it was a good week, I might have had to do day jobs, but just like two, 2 or 3 days a week. Sometimes not. Um, occasionally I did. Some kind of Broadway show things, but not a lot. I was not in the world of the people that did Broadway shows all the time. There was a couple. I did Twyla Tharp on Broadway, which was a wonderful John John Simon, the guy that had written and conducted for the band. That guy, he was doing the music, and that was a great experience. But that was not a steady type of thing, and I was not in that world of the studio musicians so much. Occasionally, I would do something, but um, not on a regular basis like some of the other folks did. Like um, the king of that world was Marvin Stamm. He would like he he was he was the emperor of that world. It seemed like at times, but a lot of that dried up in the more like the 90s, the 80s. It was just amazing. So a little bit of that. So for me, a good week would be if we're skipping ahead now to the 90s or the late 80s, I would play at the Knitting Factory, whether it was the old Knitting Factory on Houston or the new one on Leonard Street. I would play in other little clubs with other people's bands. I would play, um, I'm trying to think where else. Um, Gallery spaces that would have special concerts, like the kind of like the loft scene which I had as a student that summer of 76, 77, I'd go to a lot of those loft concerts, which was absolutely wonderful. Um, and but through either from that or through making other connections, what for me a lot of that time, a good week would be I would be in Europe. I would be traveling a lot. So I would be meeting people through various connections going to say Amsterdam and having 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 gigs set up, do them, and come back to New York. and and then maybe 6 months later, do it again, do it again. The other thing that was wonderful was that I, speaking of Sheila Jordan, we both played in the George Gruntz big band, and that provided a nice, for me as an extremely low income freelance crazy kid, the that provided some income, which was for me wonderful because we would do a tour. I was trying to think because I was thinking about Sheila. We did a tour in '84, in '83, and '84, and '87, and '88, and maybe one or two more. And then in '90 or '91, I did one more that I was invited to, and that was the one that was with Quincy and Miles at Montreux,
Oh,
um,
oh.
where they combined forces of the George Gruntz band and the Gil Evans reformed Gil Evans band with Gil Goldstein, and that was a great um, experience. But through that time, I would network and I would make friends with musicians in Switzerland, in Holland, in Germany, so in Austria. So I would then a lot of back and forth, a lot of like, I'd be in New York, go play with people in Holland, come home. Be in New York, go play with people in Switzerland, go home. And the Swiss groups were often a mix of like one or two Americans, maybe an Italian or a French, and then three Swiss. So it would be this kind of wonderful, wacky mix of free improv and difficult written music and jazz in lots of different um, configurations over the years.
I wonder if you ever played with Alvin Queen over there.
I remember, I think I met him, and I know he was busy in that sort of expatriate world of, uh, I guess, Switzerland.
Yes.
Maybe he was in Geneva. I forget for sure, or Lausanne.
When you
We met, but I
go,
never played with him. Yeah.
yeah, when you go over there and you're playing with a local rhythm section, I have two questions. Did you carry charts with you? And when you play standards on the French horn, do they fall within the range of the instrument?
Hmm.
Like
Sometimes
some
yeah, good
do you
question.
move them?
Sometimes I rarely did I change keys, but I might have often, say in those years in the mid 80s, if I would go to Europe and play with a new rhythm section, I might bring an American sax player with me, or maybe an American drummer with me, and we would play with a local bass player, or maybe a local bass player and drummer. So it would be a mix of New Yorkers and Amsterdammers, and then um, we would. I usually did not have a piano, so I didn't have to worry about telling the piano player how to do this, how to do that. And I would be really inspired by groups that might play standards, but with just bass and drums, like Lee Konitz's Motion, if you know that great record, or um, Elvin Jones. It was called Dear John C., and it was a record with um, Charlie Mariano and Richard Davis. And it was just a trio track. Some of it did have piano on, but they did this version of um, Everything Happens to Me, which I love. I love that tune. So I got my inspiration from Charlie Mariano with Elvin. So we would do that song when I would go to Europe, and I would make it my own and really. So I would pick about two or three standards in addition to my own things that were more perhaps Ornette Coleman oriented, um, or perhaps modal Coltrane type influence things, or repetitive Steve Lacy type things.
Do
So
you
I would
find
do a mix. Yeah.
did you find that you play differently without a chordal instrument? And is it necessarily that you play more because you feel like you need to
Hmm.
fill the space?
Um, that's a good question. I don't feel like I need to fill the space. You do feel more free. Like like you might just be very melodic. You might be very quote conservative. You're going to play this old time standard, but you can let it sort of like ring out. Think of Sonny Rollins, and he did "We Kiss in a Shadow" on um, East Broadway Rundown. He just played that beautiful, beautiful melody, and it's just with bass and drums on that particular track, and it's just like ah. So I kind of like as a 20 now we're talking as a 28-year-old as opposed to a 21-year-old. I'm like, I want to do that. I want to project that sort of like warmth and space and but there's this mix of abstraction at the same time that Sonny did, but with my horn. So I've never worried too much of like, oh, I have to do this because there's no piano or guitar. It was just like, I'll play the melody and we'll just solo. And our guide is more um, other great, excuse me, other great groups that have done it that way. I'm trying to think who else. Well, Jerry Mulligan sometimes would have bands where it was just um, Chet Baker and bass and drums,
Mm.
or well, of course, all the great Ornette Coleman groups, and then often Steve Lacy. Although in recent years and in later years, he certainly did use piano, and he did wonderful duos with Bobby Few, the Cleveland moved to Paris piano player that he used in his groups. Yeah.
I've had some interesting responses to the question, are there wrong notes in improvising?
Mm, that's always a good one. Not if you fix it in that phrase. Da 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 da. Da. I meant to do that. I do that a lot, especially on the horn. Or if it's in a more free improvisational setting, I might make a phrase, and I'm trying for a certain little phrase, but it didn't come out that way. There's like one note that seems sort of quote wrong. So I'll repeat that phrase, but with the wrong note. So again, it's like I meant to do that.
Yes.
And I'll make a structure out of that, in fact, little phrase where where five notes I quote were thinking that's what I wanted, and then the sixth note somewhere in there was not, and I go, okay, that's what it's going to be. I'll do that.
I had a couple quotes here about free improv, and I wanted to share them with you, see if you have a reaction. The first one is from Carl Berger,
Mm,
who said to me, more freedom is not about less precision, it's about more precision. I'm creating my own rules, and they're much more stringent. And Anthony Braxton, who I've not interviewed, but I read this, he said, I was never interested in runaway improvisation.
hmm Um, I understand that quite well. I like to have, if it's quote unquote free improvisation, whatever that means, I like to have the settings um, where it's still, I don't want to say controlled, like but I kind of am controlling it as a composer, setting up a certain structure or um, guidelines for in the moment, in which if I'm recording a series of improvisations, they might be pretty short. So right there, you have I might have, especially on the new things that I just did recently, when I got a sabbatical and I was in on the East Coast, and I met with lots of dear old friends and many new friends, and we recorded many, 2-minute tracks. They were free, but they were like lots of little miniatures. And then the end product, I would my decisions, put them together in interesting um, sequences, basically. But when something is only 2 minutes, you really just grab onto one or two ideas and let it be. If you want something to be totally free, but 15, 18, 20 minutes, you better have, as Carl kind of was saying, and or Braxton, some serious ideas up in your sleeve that you would be able to use, but you don't want to just, but not as tricks. This is the thing, it's a fine line. You don't want to use them as little tricks, but you don't want to meander at the same time of like, where do we go now? Where do we go now? And so the mark of a really good improviser is like they're able to um, make a statement with great intention, make something with that, and then maybe at a certain point change. And if it's when it's two or three or four musicians in there, they change all at once. It's a wonderful moment when that happens, I guess. So um, I like Carl's quote in that in some ways it's harder because you don't have the safety of like, okay, as long as I play these chord changes within this time framework of all the things you are, whatever the tune it is, I I won't I won't fail. It might not be great, but it won't be terrible. But if you're playing very free in a situation where you're not relying on that, it could be really good, but sometimes it can be pretty bad. It's it's a little bit more of a tightrope, one could say.
And what sounds acceptable to the person playing it may be different from what an audience person hears.
That is true. Um, Sometimes the musician is like zeroing in, maybe with another improviser together, on some very specific, strange little molecular grainy sound, and you're like, "Oh, I like that," and you just want to stay there, um, like zeroing in like a microscope. And certain listeners would be like, "Wow, oh, that's so great," but other people are like, "Oh my God, they're playing the same weird little sound." But that's just the nature of the beast. Um, I don't know if you know the great British improviser Evan Parker. He will zero in on, um, well, he'll do duos. He used to do duos with Anthony Braxton, and they might zero in on some one little sound and just stay there, or with circular breathing, or um, over the overtones. Well, you know, as a saxophone, the overtones you can get um, and the harmonics and just stay in that one little place. So some people love it. Some people like, ah.
Yes, I see. Roscoe Mitchell, who I had a session with.
Exactly. He's a good example of that.
Yeah, he got I think an NEA recently, and the little promotional video for him, and it showed him with, I think it was like a sopranino sax or something, and he's just going,
Right.
and I tried to have an open mind, and that's his, that's him, I guess.
Yeah. Well, he loves his long tones, and I know in other situations where he was going to play like a solo concert, who was my friend Wayne Horvitz wrote a story about it, and he came early, and before the concert started, as he was to warm up, he just played one long tone for an hour, just like that, zeroing in. So I always love that about Roscoe, but it's true. That's a good example of the extreme, um, what's the word? Uh, there's another word for zeroing in on it, but I've lost my,
Focus, I suppose.
yeah, extreme focus on one small thing, kind of. Um, I loved her. When I was only those 2 years at New England Conservatory, I did have to write a paper, and I wrote a paper on Roscoe, and I wish I could find it. There was Oh, you might have it in your archives. There was a article on Roscoe in the Canadian Coda magazine. That guy named Bill Smith, not the clarinet player, but the writer. And the end of this quote from Roscoe was like, he said, I just want to make sounds that are as natural as the way these ducks over here are quacking in this pond. And I love that quote. He said, that's what I want to do. Those ducks aren't worrying about whether it's right or wrong. They're just quacking. And if I could find that quote, I don't know. It's hard to find those Coda magazines.
Yes,
You might have it somewhere
I might. I'll
in
take
the
a look. Yeah,
um but then you just probably in the library at Hamilton.
yeah.
A lot of places have downbeats, and that's about it. A lot of that stuff is, you know, but there's a lot of people. You're probably in touch with Lauren
Yes, I am.
Schonberg.
Hmm.
Yeah. I bet he's one. He could, if anybody could find it, he
That
could.
would be
Or
or
my
Phil
old,
Shapp, but he's gone.
yeah, my old buddy um wrote a book on Lester Young and wrote the book on Coltrane. Lewis Porter.
Okay.
He could find that, I bet.
I want to
So,
hone in a little bit. When you were talking about your sabbatical and being on the East Coast, the
mm.
shorter compositions, was this made into Heaven and Hell?
Those that was a little earlier.
Okay.
Heaven and Hell was from when I moved to well, I moved, so I'll make it really quick. All those various things I was doing, that was in New York, go to Europe, back and forth, go blah blah blah. Then I got married and then I had kids. Then I had two kids and trying to get the two kids on the subway, et cetera, et cetera. My wife was a Seattle native. I'd been in Manhattan for 24, 25 years. And so we were like, okay. And I had friends that had moved to Seattle. Let's let's make that move. It'll be just better in many ways, especially for our kids and our lives, et cetera, et cetera. And it was. It's been great. Um, but then I had this idea for making a larger a larger project, not a quintet, not a septet, but more like a tentet, nonat tentet, where I could work with those ideas a little bit more. So that was a group of Seattle musicians plus the great trumpet player Russ Johnson, who's now in the Milwaukee area. So some of those pieces were miniatures, it's true, but some of them were much more longer thought out, composed. I was very fortunate in that early, a couple years earlier, I was able to go to have a residency at the McDowell Colony. Oh, that was heaven, just wonderful. And a lot of the music for Heaven and Hell I wrote for that um, type of configuration. I had to adjust the instrumentation a bit. So, but that was a mix of um, notated compositions with improv, and then short takes that were really just like little 60-second meditations, kind of.
Yes.
So later, now fast forward to um, another 10 years or even more. No, not, no. Yeah, something like that. I've been teaching at Cornish College of the Arts, where many great people have been there and taught. Julian Priester had been there. Um, um, Gary Peacock had taught there. Anyway, I'd been there for 15 years. I was very fortunate in that I was awarded a sabbatical. But I thought, okay, I'm going to go back to Brooklyn and New York and Boston and upstate New York and meet with lots of people who are near and dear to me and just set up little now you can get higher quality quick setup recording devices. So I did. I recorded 110 takes. I went a little crazy. Um, and uh, lots of those were very short, 1 to 2 to 3 minute improvisations. But I knew that all of these people were totally um, capable, knew exactly what to do. I barely had to say a word. I would do something like um, with the great trumpet player Stephen Bernstein and the trombone player Joe Fiedler. We did a brass trio. I'd say, okay, Joe and Stephen, Joe and I are going to be like we're pretending that we're a bluegrass banjo. Stephen, you're the singer, but with your slide trumpet. Okay, this is going to be the tempo. That's it. And they go, got it. So we did, and that's like maybe one of the first takes of that day. So a lot of things of those, literally 110 tracks with lots of different. I did 11 sessions. A lot of them were were these little 2 minute miniatures, basically,
Was
with no written music, nothing more than my verbal. Let's try this. Let's try that. Sorry.
was Waltz for the Proud Tired
Mm.
Warriors one of those?
That was written um, at McDowell. That was um, part of Heaven and Hell. That was more hard to describe. There was a sequence of chords in the four bar or 6 bar um, modules that kept changing. I think I was reading an article or reading something about the composer Ervo Pärt, and he was taking these phrases and going up a third, down a major third, up a minor third, down a major third, up a minor. So I just said, hey, I could take this little cell that I wrote and do it with that, but have the alto sax solo over the whole thing. So that was that one.
Did the alto sax player, um, how do I put this? Have a chart? Did he know?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that music had very specific. We all had parts, so that I would go da da, and then the trumpet ba ba da da ba ba. That was very written out, and then the the changes I gave to the alto sax. He had nothing written to actually play though. He just soloed over the whole thing, like kind of like Lee Konitz might, or he had studied. This is a guy named Mark Taylor, but not the French horn player Mark Taylor. There's lots of Mark Taylors. He's a fantastic alto player named Mark Taylor in Seattle who had studied with Dick Oates, the great sax player, and he had some of that approach in there too. Um, but he did have a set of changes, but only a set of changes. Um, for that particular piece. There are other tracks on that were just little meditations. And then the other ones were much more big, thick, massive, like Messiaen, crazy chords, um, um, very fat, um, parallel motion of like everybody has their own like 8 different notes. The last track, one of the on that Heaven and
Okay.
Hell.
Yeah,
So,
speaking of that, parallel notes, choppy and dumb.
oh yeah, that one.
Because I just
That one,
sat down and I was going to the piano. I said, okay, there's one note here that sustains, and then there's this. I couldn't figure out the interval.
that's great. Good, good, good listening. I wanted something literally to be like this sort of feeling of kind of like dread. Basically, that a lot of that's about looking back a few years at 9/11 in New York City. And not that particular track, but some of them were. And like, oh my God, we have kids now, or we're getting ready to have this beautiful new baby boy. And now 9/11 has just hit New York City. So that Choppy and Dumb wasn't literally trying to be that, but I wanted these low notes just to be like, I don't even know if I gave them specific pitches. That's why you couldn't figure it out. I just think I told them play any low note and just hold it. And then it was a sax quartet. I think I had the sax quartet play. That was written out. Bop, 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 bop. ba 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 ba. And they nailed it. They said, "You want us to play it like really dumb, like stupid?" Ba, 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 ba. I said,
Yes,
"No, no problem. We can do that."
it's almost struck me like, all right, play with a junior high tone here.
Yeah, it was kind of, but I actually wanted that. So when they did it, they were like, "Are you sure?" Like, yes, I love that. That's what I wanted.
Would you be, if you played that piece in a live situation, would you be offended if people found it to be humorous
Oh,
and started laughing?
yeah, no, that would be totally fine. I would not be, I would love it. If it made them laugh, I would love that. I don't have a problem if people, if they laugh just because they think that's a stupid sound, maybe I wouldn't like that. But if they laugh because they're like, this music has some kind of humor to it, and I like that, then great. I'm happy. Yeah.
At
Because
what
a lot
point?
of my music does have some humor
At
there
what
in
point
there.
do you assign a title to your
Mm.
work?
Some that's sometimes it's hard, especially all these crazy the miniatures of the last fall. I can sit, it's only on Bandcamp, so be happy to send you codes for those more recent ones. Um, the but sometimes it's after the fact. I'll listen, I'll listen and I'll go, okay, this should be the title for this. This should be the title for that. Sometimes I'm really working on the piece if it's more of a written music piece and I'm on the piano and I'm sweating it out, um, I will already know the title. I think it just depends on the situation. If it's very much a free improv, usually the title comes afterwards. I'm trying to think. What about um,
Well,
yeah, something like that.
I wanted to ask about this tune. What is this thing called first
Mhm.
strike capacity?
You're right. Capability.
Capability.
Um, well, if you remember the Reagan era, Reagan and Brezhnev doesn't seem like so different again. Um, I knew that my alto sax player at that time named Ed Jackson loved to play over the changes of what is this thing called love. And I wanted to write, that's what it is. I wanted to write something more along the lines of like Tristano might write over that, like subconscious Lee, basically. Um, and so I just wrote this crazy line um, on what is this thing called love. And then I realized, oh, I want the first entire chorus to be just walking bass, then these little hits, then the actual crazy notey melody, then the hits, and then over and out. Um, and so afterwards, I think I thought that sort of the doomsday humor, Stanley Kubrick humor, I guess, and that came right to it.
That's good
But we're
Stanley Kubrick humor. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, do you have a sense of what you hope listeners get from your music? I asked this question to Rand Blake. He said, as long as I don't bore the listener, I'm somewhat happy.
That's
But I'm
good.
wondering what, the your music, at least the ones that I've heard, is adventurous. And what do you hope that people get out of it?
Mm. Well, even if it's even if it's humor, I still want to make some kind of an emotional human connection, I would say. But if they like it as a purely sound experience, it's sound, um, textural sound, um, and liking it purely for that, the interesting textures of the sound that they're listening to, that's fine as well. But for me, if I'm hearing something like that, even if it's like two improvisers playing just like one note, but with like interesting overtones, et cetera, to me, that can be very emotional. I might be kind of weird in that way, but so it doesn't have to necessarily be a beautiful melody. Although I love beautiful melodies. I love the beautiful melodies of like Ornette Coleman, you know, like Lonely Woman or something like that. Or um, trying to think what else. Uh, I don't know. So if if it affects them one way or another, I'll be happy. Hopefully it won't annoy them so much that they're gritting their teeth. But I think that's usually not the case. I think usually whether it's some kind of emotional connection or humor or both, or um, the sort of enjoyment, almost like sensual enjoyment of the sound itself. I love the idea of that as well. Like Sonny Rollins on just playing that one note in the mid to late 50s.
One thing that's I think is wonderful about your tunes is that when you write unison lines with the horn, and
Mm,
whether it's with an alto or tenor sax,
mm,
they sound so different from if you were playing the trumpet. We're
hmm.
so used to that trumpet sax,
Yeah,
all through bebop, and the tone quality of the horn just makes it like a new thing.
yeah, yeah. It's true. Um, used to talk about that with the arranger composer Jim McNeely, that he would say the horn is kind of like this glue. If it's a larger ensemble and there's a horn inside there, you might not hear like, oh, there's a French horn in there. But if you take away the horn, you're going, oh, that's totally different. That it provides this um um well, he used the word glue. It's like this glue between the different instruments. Um, and um, and it's true. The overtones of the sax and the overtones of the French horn are such that when they're together, it's very different from trumpet and sax, or two saxes, or two or two horns for that matter. So I've always loved that.
Some of those tougher lines that you've written, I almost wondered like you were writing them knowing that a really good sax player could play them. And then you almost forgot that you had to play it too.
Yes, you got it. That's true sometimes. Or you could play it when you're 28, and then you're going to revisit it when you're 58. And you're like, what was I thinking? How am I going to play that? And that one called, what is this thing called First Rate Capability on this sabbatical trip? It was wonderful. I met up with Ed Jackson, the alto player, again, and we played in this club that he has, this small kind of informal club, which is wonderful in near Elmont in Queens, Jamaica, Queens. And we played that tune, and I was like, whoa, we got together. We both had to practice that one again. And he also was saying there's a section in the bridge. It's the worst because it's the pinky. You got to, as an alto sax player, you have to do this pinky. I didn't know. For me, that part of it was actually easy. And he was, and all sax players were like, "Why did you pick those three notes?" Sorry, I'll let the sax players do a little work on that one.
Really, they've got all those keys. It should be easy.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Um, it something I came across today made me think that next January 6th will be the fifth anniversary of the um,
Mm.
attack
Ah,
on Congress.
right, right.
And I don't know why my mind went because I was listening to your music and I was thinking if someone commissioned you to write a work to
Mm,
um, mark that anniversary,
mm.
would you accept it? And where would you start?
Oh boy. Wow. I think I would accept it, but it would be a difficult job. There would be a lot of um, I don't know what it would come out sounding like. Irony, like Shostakovich type mocking of stupidity, you know, um, Mingus, like Fables of Faubus. That's the first thing that comes to mind. Shostakovich making fun of the Stalin ass-kissing generals, and Mingus making fun of the horrible racist governors at the time. There'd be plenty you could come up with between I'm trying to think who or what else. Um, but um, that's plenty. Shostakovich and Mingus. I think that's the first two names that come to mind. And I would like maybe I would be off and running, but it would be a difficult job. Also, depending on
Who you could get, your budget.
how who I could get, but also the political climate, even from now to coming up in January 6th. What's going to happen in the midterms, et cetera, et cetera. Will we feel a little bit more hopeful, or will we all be ready to jump off a bridge? Don't know. But I would take the challenge in any case, for sure.
Do you ever get away from your music room, your piano, your horn, and just walk and work on ideas, even not on
Yeah.
purpose?
Yeah. Yeah, I have been doing that a little bit more. It's it's been hard to like A, teaching college full time, B, teaching college full time, then with the COVID days. And that really took a lot to um, just keep your spirits up, to then and then to be super creative in the middle of all of that. Some people have been. My hat is off to them. A lot of my friends, I don't know if you know the flute player, composer Jamie Baum. She's she's somebody you might want to interview. She has this great record out that's based on sort of modern American poetry, but it's with this sort of octet. And there's Adrian Rich or somebody else, but with great players. But she was stuck in Manhattan in a high rise. Sometimes didn't get out for weeks. It was horrible. So she's like, "All right, I got to do something." So she wrote this beautiful suite of pieces, but she was not teaching full time, and she didn't have kids. Um, so, but she made great use of that time in that way. Um, but once COVID was over, and I'm trying to think, then I got back to teaching more in person, which was great. Um, but it's been hard to have the bandwidth and the brain power to like work on these big ideas. But I could do a lot of shorter improv oriented pieces. And then I got the sabbatical, and that's been wonderful. But now I've retired. Now I do. I feel like, okay, so if I'm walking outside with no headphones, no music, no nothing, no agenda, I'm like thinking, okay, if I have three saxes and three brass, and I would have them do this, and I could have them do this, and more along the lines of Heaven and Hell, or the other one called Nine Surprises, which I could send you a link to, which is kind of like Heaven and Hell Part Two, a little bit, a little more optimistic, not quite so dark. So now I am starting to do that, and I need to, starting like today, um, get to that more. I'm like, um, um, well, you might be finding out too if you're not completely retired because you're doing this job as a half-time job, but still, um, if you have more free time on your hands, you're like, oh, okay, now utilize um, the bandwidth that
Yes.
is now just freed up
Yes.
to do some of these other things, and I really do want to. Yeah,
Okay. I'm going to wrap up with
yeah.
one and a half questions.
Okay.
Did you teach long enough that you noticed um, with the students a change in what they brought as freshmen? Um, I guess I'm sort of leaning towards the technology question. How
Hmm.
did it affect? Did you see an effect of the ever changing technology and the outlook and the general education that students came to you with?
Mm. Yeah, I would say very much so. Yes. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, the students that were coming as first year students might have played in band much more, might have played guitars and played real instruments much more. They didn't necessarily know about computers, but they could play instruments and they knew basic music theory. Not all, but many. Um, Fast forward to 4 years ago, 5 years ago, or 3 years ago, many had never played in a band, but they had very good ears. They were good with computers, and they could do their Ableton or their Logic music on their computers, but they didn't really understand music theory very well. They knew how to program, but not say, okay, I've decided that this is going to be a C7 sharp 11 uh, type of a thing. Um, And so I had to teach, I had to fill in those gaps at times. But creatively, um, what's been wonderful is even though it's the the numbers have shrunk and of the actual number of students that are wanting to come and do music, the ones that did come within that within those 4 years, from year one to year four, some are coming up with wonderful, great, wild, crazy, creative ideas. And that makes me really happy that the um the creativity just keeps going and going. And a lot of them, of course, are well, any kid would be better than me at technology. I'm learning I can do little things. I have my Ableton, I have my Finale, but they are much more adapt and fast with technology in general. I just wish more of them, well, I wish they had opportunities to play more, and I wish there were more well, Cornish is a special case because it's sort of changed much more to singer-songwriters, and we might only have like two trumpets, two sax players. They might be really good and really creative, but it's not like an Eastman or a New England Conservatory or a University of Washington where there's going to be enough people to really be in a big band, et cetera. Um, so um, those I felt bad for the kids that were stuck in high school, their junior and senior years in their bedroom during COVID.
Yeah.
That was really, really rough. And you might have at Hamilton met some that were, oh yeah, this is the first time I'm in a class now,
Very
two
odd.
years ago. Yeah.
Okay, my half a question. Do you think
Okay.
it was odd that Stan Kenton used mellophones instead of French horns?
Um, I think I never thought about it much one way or the other, but I think um, he wanted that direct sound. He didn't want the more non-directional, because the thing with the horn, it's true. Um, if there's a big band and there's even a couple of horns, if it's soft, it'll work, like Claude Thornhill. But if it's brassy and loud and trumpets and loud trombones, and if you wanted that extra thing, the mellophones, I guess, make more sense
I
because
think I think
it's
you
the
nailed it.
The directional.
Direction, because he wasn't
Do
usually
you
he wasn't after subtlety.
know? Do you know the famous line from the great oh God, no, I can't say his name. There was a great lead trumpet player,
He's talking.
Al Porcino.
Oh
You know,
yes, that's right. I've heard this story.
he was
Yes.
on the bus and he said, "Fellas, um, I think tonight we're gonna do something we've never done before." And Albert Porcino said, "You mean swing, Stan? Swing?" Oh, he
Oh,
was a character. I met him on one of those George Gruntz tours. He came and said hi to everybody. And even then, he was dark. He's like, "Yeah, I play these gigs in German big bands, but it's a wasteland." He was very dark. But you know what? There's another saying about joke about music. How do you make a musician complain? Give him a gig.
ah, good one.
So that was Al Porcino in the
All right.
late
Yes.
80s, probably.
Eddie Burt was on the band, and he said there was one gig where they were really crowded on a stage, incredibly crowded, and for some
Oh,
reason, because of that, it felt great, and they started swinging. And
oh no.
Stan stopped the band and said, "This does not Count Basie."
Oh, terrible, terrible. Oh, reminds me of okay, one more, and then we both got to go. Glenn Ferris, who's a fantastic trombone player that had played with both um, Frank Zappa and Harry James, which is hard to imagine. And he's been in Paris for many, many years and played with everybody. But when he would really get into a solo, he would just move and swing. He just couldn't help it. And at one point, Harry James told the lead trombone player, the trumpet player, saying, "That kid is pretty good, but tell him to stop conducting the band."
We could go on and
So,
on, couldn't we?
oh yeah. All right.
All
If
right.
I'm happy to send you more. I could send you pages and pages of or links
All
if you'd
right.
like. I'll send you some of the links the links to the Bandcamp the more recent short the miniatures basically those
Okay.
records
Excellent.
from the trip. Yes.
Enjoy that. Thank you.
Thank you
All
for
right.
doing what you do. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
It's been
Yes, yes,
great.
yes. Okay.
I'll just stop this and we'll say our goodbyes.
Okay.